Kefver Zoan stood at the gates of the United States Space Force Academy and felt nothing but disappointment. The buildings looked old and simple. There were no floating towers or energy shields like the great military schools on his home world. Just plain concrete and glass structures that seemed to belong in the past. The alien warrior was 8 feet tall with dark blue skin that gleamed like metal. His arms had cybernetic parts that could crush steel. His eyes could see incomplete. Darkness. He had fought in 12 different star systems and never lost a battle. The Zephyrian Empire had sent him here as part of a peace deal between species. He was supposed to learn about human military ways and teach them about proper warfare. Kefver thought this would be easy. He had watched human movies and shows that his people had picked up from space signals. Humans seemed weak and emotional. They cried when they got hurt. They made jokes during serious moments. How could such soft creatures be good at war? Colonel Jake Morrison walked up to greet him. The human was much shorter than Kefver and looked old with gray hair and wrinkles around his eyes. He wore a simple uniform with no armor or weapons visible. "Welcome to our academy," Colonel Morrison said with a smile. "I hope you find your time here educational." Kefver looked down at the small human. "I am sure I will learn much about your primitive methods." The colonel's smile did not change, but something flickered in his eyes. "Oh, I think you will be surprised by what you learn here." Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez came to show Kefver around the campus. She was even smaller than the colonel, with dark hair pulled back in a simple style. She moved with quick, confident steps that made Kefver wonder if all humans were always in such a hurry. "This is our main training facility," she sighed, pointing to a large building. "We'll start your orientation there tomorrow." As they walked, Kefver noticed groups of human cadets doing various activities. Some were running in formation while singing loud songs. Others were doing exercises that looked painful. What surprised him was that they all seemed happy about it. They were laughing and joking, even while sweating and breathing hard. "Your soldiers seem to enjoy suffering," Kefver observed. Lieutenant Rodriguez laughed. "We prefer to call it building character. Pain is just weakness leaving the body." Kefver did not understand this at all. In his military, pain was something to avoid or overcome with technology. These humans seemed to seek it out on purpose. They entered a classroom where a group of cadets was studying. The instructor was showing them images of different weapons and vehicles. Kefver expected to see advanced energy weapons and force fields. Instead, he saw simple projectile weapons and metal vehicles with wheels. "Your technology is very basic," Kefver said to Lieutenant Rodriguez. "Simple tools for simple minds," she replied with another smile. "We find that the best solutions are usually the easiest ones." One of the cadets, a young man with short brown hair, raised his hand. "Lieutenant, what if we modified the rifle to fire 2 rounds at once?" "That would probably destroy the weapon, Cadet Blake," the instructor replied. "But it would do twice the damage before it broke," Blake said with a grin. The other cadets laughed and started discussing ways to make weapons more powerful even if it made them more dangerous to use. Kefver was confused. Why would they want to make their tools more likely to hurt themselves? After the class, Lieutenant Rodriguez introduced him to some of the cadets. Cadet Ryan Blake was the one who had suggested modifying the rifle. He was from a farming family in Iowa and had dirt under his fingernails, even though they were in a clean academy. "So you're the alien warrior we heard about," Blake said, looking up at Kefver without any fear. "I bet you've got some cool weapons." "I have access to plasma rifles that can cut through your strongest metals," Kefver replied, expecting the human to be impressed or scared. "Plasma, huh?" Blake scratched his head. "I wonder what would happen if you hooked that up to a car battery. Probably get a lot more power output." Cadet Lisa Park, a thin girl with smart eyes, joined the conversation. "You would probably overload the containment field and create a small explosion," Exactly, Blake said excitedly. Imagine the damage that could do. Kethver stared at them. These humans were talking about making weapons more dangerous to themselves, as if it was a good thing. In his military, safety was always the first concern. His people had strict rules about weapon modifications, and would never suggest making something that could hurt the user. Later that evening, Kethver was given a room in the barracks with the other cadets. The room was small and simple, with just a bed, desk, and storage space. He had expected private quarters befitting his status as an elite warrior. As he tried to sleep, he could hear the human cadets in nearby rooms. They were not resting quietly like proper soldiers should. Instead, they were laughing and telling stories about dangerous things they had done back home. One cadet talked about jumping off a cliff into water. Another described racing vehicles at high speeds. A third mentioned fighting wild animals with just his hands. Kethver began to wonder what kind of creatures these humans really were. They seemed to enjoy danger and pain. They wanted to make their weapons more powerful, even if it meant getting hurt. They treated warlike training as if it was fun rather than serious preparation for battle. For the first time in his long military career, Kethver felt a small touch of uncertainty. Maybe these humans were not as simple as he had thought. Maybe there was more to learn here than he had expected. As he finally drifted off to sleep, he could still hear the human cadets talking and laughing in the darkness. Tomorrow he would begin his real training with them. He was starting to suspect that it might not be as easy as he had planned. Kethver woke up at dawn to the sound of loud music and shouting. He looked out his window and saw human cadets running in formation, while a man with a big voice yelled at them. The strange thing was that the cadets were yelling back and seemed to enjoy it. Sergeant Pete Carson was the man doing the yelling. He was shorter than Kethver, but built like a rock with scars on his arms and face. His voice could probably be heard from space. "Welcome to the real world, alien boy," Sergeant Carson said when he met Kethver. "Today we see what you're made of." The first training exercise was a combat simulation. Kethver felt confident. He had trained in the best war schools in the galaxy. These primitive humans with their simple weapons would be easy to defeat. The exercise took place in a fake city built for training. There were buildings, streets, and obstacles everywhere. Kethver was put on one team with 4 human cadets. Their job was to capture a building held by another team of humans. "This should be simple," Kethver told his team. "We advance carefully and use proper military tactics." Cadet Ryan Blake looked at him with a strange smile. "Simple is boring. Let's make it interesting." Cadet Lisa Park was checking her equipment with quick fingers. "The gravity generator in Sector 3 has been acting up all week. Still works, but it's not stable." "Perfect," said Cadet Maria Santos, who was their team medic. "That gives us options." Kethver did not understand what they meant. An unstable gravity generator was a danger to avoid, not an opportunity to use. The exercise began. Kethver expected his team to move forward in formation, using cover and advancing slowly like proper soldiers. Instead, the humans split up and started doing things that made no sense. Blake climbed up the side of a building using just his hands and feet. Park disappeared into a maintenance tunnel. Santos started setting up what looked like medical equipment, but was connecting it to power cables in a way that did not seem medical at all. "What are you doing?" Kethver asked into his radio. "This is not proper tactics." "Relax, big guy," Blake's voice came back. "We know what we're doing." The enemy team was defending the target building with good positions and clear fields of fire. Any normal attack would be stopped easily. Kethver was about to suggest they retreat and plan a better approach when Park's voice crackled over the radio. "Gravity field destabilized in 3, 2, 1. Suddenly, everything in a large area around the target building started floating. Defenders, weapons, furniture, everything began drifting in the air with no control. The humans had somehow turned the broken gravity generator into a weapon. But that was just the beginning. Santos had rigged her medical equipment to create a thick fog that filled the floating area. The enemy team could not see anything and had no way to move in the zero-gravity. Blake dropped from his high position right into the middle of the chaos. Instead of being confused like everyone else, he moved through the floating environment like he had trained for it his whole life. He captured 3 enemy soldiers before they knew what was happening. "Building secured," Blake reported. That was fun. The whole exercise was over in less than 10 minutes. What should have been a long, difficult battle had become a quick victory because the humans had used a broken piece of equipment as a weapon. Sergeant Carson gathered everyone after the exercise. "Good work, Team Blake. Creative use of environmental hazards." "Environmental hazards?" Cuthbert asked. "That gravity generator could have killed someone." "Could have," Carson agreed. "But it didn't. That's what makes it a good tactic." Cuthbert stared at the sergeant. "You train your soldiers to use dangerous, unpredictable equipment as weapons?" "We train our soldiers to use everything as a weapon," Carson replied. "A broken tool is just a tool that works differently." The next exercise was even worse. The human team had to cross a field filled with explosive mines. Normal military doctrine said to find a safe path or clear the mines carefully. The humans decided to set off all the mines at once and use the explosions to launch themselves across the field faster. Cadet Nick Johnson, who specialized in heavy weapons, had calculated exactly how much explosive force they needed. "If we time it right, the blast wave will push us forward instead of up. And if you time it wrong?" Cuthbert asked. "Then we'll find out what the inside of a crater looks like," Johnson replied cheerfully. They timed it right. The massive explosion threw the entire team across the minefield in seconds. They landed hard but safely on the other side, while the enemy team was still trying to figure out what had happened. Cuthbert realized that these humans did not think about warfare the same way as other species. Most soldiers tried to avoid danger and minimize risks. Humans seemed to collect dangers and turn them into advantages. During the lunch break, he sat with some of the cadets and tried to understand their thinking. "Why do you use such risky tactics?" he asked. "Because they work," Park answered. "The enemy expects us to be careful and logical. When we do something crazy, they don't know how to respond." "But you could get hurt or killed," Cuthbert pointed out. "We could get hurt or killed using safe tactics too," Blake said. "At least this way, we win faster." Santos nodded. "Better to take a big risk for a quick victory than a small risk for a long fight." Cuthbert thought about this. In his military, they had rules and procedures for everything. There were proper ways to attack, proper ways to defend, and proper ways to handle equipment. These humans seemed to think that rules were just suggestions. The afternoon brought more exercises, and each one showed him something new about human thinking. They turned the training robots into suicide bombs. They used the building's fire safety system to flood enemy positions. They even convinced the computer running the simulation that it was under attack and needed to defend itself. By the end of the day, Cuthbert's team had won every single exercise. They had done it by breaking rules, using equipment in ways it was not designed for, and taking risks that would have gotten them court-martialed in any other military. As he went to bed that night, Cuthbert realized that his first day of training had taught him something important. These humans were not primitive or simple. They were something much more dangerous. They were unpredictable. For the first time in his long career as a warrior, Cuthbert felt a chill of real fear. Cuthbert could not sleep well anymore. Every night, he had dreams about humans doing impossible things in battle. He would wake up covered in sweat, which was something that had never happened to him before. His cybernetic parts were running. Constant scans to make sure he was not sick. The third week at the academy brought new classes that made everything worse. Captain Steve Miller taught a course called Military Psychology. Cuthbert thought this would be simple lessons about keeping Soldiers brave and focused. He was very wrong. Today we will study human warfare throughout history, Captain Miller announced to the mixed class of human cadets in Kethvar. Let's start with something basic. Who can tell me about the Battle of Thermopylae? Cadet Tony Garcia raised his hand. He was a thin young man who used to be in street gangs before joining the academy. 300 Spartans held off thousands of Persian soldiers for 3 days. They knew they would die but fought anyway. Correct, Captain Miller said. And why did they do this? Because dying well was more important than living badly, Garcia replied. Kethvar felt confused. This makes no sense. Why choose to die when you could retreat and fight another day? Captain Miller smiled at him. Our alien friend asks the right question. You see, Kethvar, humans have a very different relationship with death than most species. We don't just accept it, we weaponize it. The captain brought up images on the classroom screen. They showed human soldiers throughout history doing things that seemed insane. Charging into enemy fire, fighting even when badly wounded, destroying themselves to take enemies with them. Humans are persistence predators, Captain Miller explained. In nature, we chased our prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. We didn't give up, ever. This instinct carries over into our warfare. Cadet Sam Davis, a quiet young woman who rarely spoke, suddenly said, "My grandfather fought in Afghanistan. He told me about soldiers who kept fighting for 3 days after being shot. They should have been dead but refused to quit." Medical impossibility, Kethvar said. Injured soldiers must seek treatment immediately. Should and must are different words, Captain Miller replied. Humans often ignore what should happen and do what must happen instead. The captain showed them a video of something called the Battle of Stalingrad. Kethvar watched human soldiers fighting in destroyed buildings, eating rats to survive, and using dead bodies as fortifications. They fought for months in conditions that would kill most species in days. This is not warfare, Kethvar said. This is madness. To you, maybe, Captain Miller agreed. But to humans, this is just Tuesday. The class laughed, but Kethvar did not understand the joke. How could such horror be funny to them? Dr. Helen Wright taught xenobiology, which was supposed to be about different alien species. Instead, she spent most of the time talking about humans compared to other species. Most intelligent species in the galaxy developed from prey animals, Dr. Wright explained. They learned to hide, to run, to avoid conflict. Humans developed from persistence hunters. We learned to chase, to corner, to never give up. She showed brain scans of different species during stress. Most alien brains showed fear and the desire to escape. Human brains showed excitement and the desire to fight. Humans have something unique, Dr. Wright continued. We get more dangerous when we are losing. Most species become weaker under pressure. Humans become stronger. Cadet Kate Ross raised her hand. Is that why we like war movies and video games? Exactly, Dr. Wright replied. Other species see conflict as something to survive. Humans see it as entertainment. Kethvar thought about all the human movies and shows he had studied. They were full of wars, fights, and violence. But the humans in the stories always seemed to enjoy the fighting. They made jokes during battles and smiled when facing death. Your species treats war as a game? Kethvar asked. Not exactly, Dr. Wright said. We treat war as art. We study it, improve it, and practice it even when we don't need to. No other species does this. That night, Kethvar went to the Academy Library to research human military history. What he found there gave him nightmares. For weeks, humans had been fighting wars for thousands of years. But they did not just fight to win territory or resources like other species. They fought for ideas, for revenge, for sport, and sometimes just because they were bored. He read about something called World War II, where humans killed over 50 million of their own species. But the terrifying part was not the numbers. It was how creative they had been about killing. They invented new weapons, new tactics, and new ways to destroy things just for that one war. He found records of human soldiers who fought battles they could not win just to make their enemies pay a higher price. He read about pilots who crashed their planes into enemy ships on purpose. He learned about something called nuclear weapons that could destroy entire planets, and humans had built thousands of them. The worst part was a section about war crimes. These were rules that humans had created to limit how terrible war could be. But HFY realized that the rules existed because humans knew exactly how to break them. They had studied every possible way to make war more horrible and then agreed not to use them. Most species never needed such rules because they could not imagine doing such things. Humans needed the rules because they could imagine everything. HFY found himself reading about human concepts like scorched earth tactics, where they would destroy everything useful in an area rather than let enemies have it. He read about acceptable losses, which meant humans would sacrifice some of their own soldiers to achieve victory. The most frightening thing he found was called mutually assured destruction. This was a human strategy where they built enough weapons to destroy everyone, including themselves, just to make sure their enemies would not attack them. What kind of species threatens to commit suicide to prevent war? What kind of mind thinks that total destruction is an acceptable outcome? As HFY sat in the quiet library, surrounded by books about human warfare, he realized something that chilled him to his core. Every other species in the galaxy fought wars to survive. Humans were the only species that had turned warfare into a science, an art, and a form of entertainment all at the same time. They did not just win wars. They studied how to win them better. They practiced fighting even during peace. They created fictional wars for fun and made them more brutal than real ones. For the first time in his life, HFY understood what true fear felt like. These humans were not primitive. They were not weak. They were the most dangerous predators the galaxy had ever produced, and they were pretending to be civilized. He closed the books and walked back to his room, but sleep would not come. Outside his window, he could hear human cadets laughing and playing games. Normal, happy sounds that now seemed terrifying because he knew what those minds were capable of creating. Major Dan Cooper had scars on his face and arms that told stories of many battles. His voice was quiet, but when he spoke, everyone listened. He taught advanced tactical operations, which was the hardest class at the academy. "This week we do something special," Major Cooper announced. "A 3-day survival exercise in the mountains. HFY will try to reach the extraction point while avoiding capture. 5 teams of cadets will hunt him." HFY felt confident. Again, this was exactly the kind of challenge he was trained for. He had cybernetic enhancements that let him see in the dark, move without making noise, and go without food or water for days. His homeworld had much harsher environments then. Earth's mountains. "This should be easy," HFY said. "I have superior technology and training," Major Cooper smiled. "We'll see about that." The exercise area was 50 square miles of rough mountain terrain with forests, cliffs, and streams. HFY would start in the center and had to reach a pickup point on the northern edge. The human teams would try to catch him before he got there. HFY studied the map and planned his route. He would move at night when his night vision gave him an advantage. He would avoid open areas and stick to dense forest where his enemies could not see him coming. He would use his superior speed to cover ground quickly and stay ahead of any pursuit. The exercise began at sunset. HFY felt good as he moved through the forest. His cybernetic eyes could see everything clearly. In the dark, his enhanced hearing picked up every sound. His body did not get tired like organic beings did. For the first few hours, everything went according to plan. He covered several miles without seeing any sign of the human teams. He began to think that this exercise would prove his superiority over these primitive hunters. Then he heard something that made him stop. It was very quiet, but his enhanced hearing caught it. Someone was following him. HFY turned around and used his best sensors to scan the area behind him. He saw nothing. He heard nothing. But somehow he knew someone was there. He changed direction and moved faster. After an hour, he stopped to listen again. The feeling of being watched was stronger now. His cybernetic systems ran full diagnostics, but found no evidence of pursuit. Yet every instinct told him he was being hunted. As the night went on, the feeling got worse. Sometimes he thought he saw movement in the corner of his eye, but when he looked, nothing was there. Sometimes he heard a sound that might have been a footstep, but it could have been wind in the leaves. By dawn, HFY was starting to feel nervous. He had not slept and had been moving for over 12 hours. His cybernetic parts were working perfectly, but his organic brain was getting tired. He found a good hiding spot in some thick bushes and tried to rest. But every few minutes, some small sound or movement would make him alert again. He could not shake the feeling that eyes were watching him. On the second day, things got worse. HFY started finding signs that the humans had been near. A broken branch here, a footprint in soft dirt there. But the signs were always old, as if the humans had been there hours before. The strange thing was that the signs seemed to be everywhere. It was like the humans could predict where he would go, and had already been to those places. But that was impossible. HFY was moving randomly and changing direction often. By the second night, HFY realized he was in trouble. He had barely slept in 2 days. His food and water were running low. His cybernetic systems were working harder to keep up with his stress, which drained their power. Worse, he was starting to make mistakes. He stepped on loose rocks that made noise. He missed obvious hiding spots. He was moving slower and thinking less clearly. That was when he saw the first human. Cadet Sam Davis was sitting on a rock about 200 yards away. She was not hiding or trying to be sneaky. She was just sitting there, watching him through a scope. When she saw that he had noticed her, she waved. HFY ran. His cybernetic legs carried him faster than any human could move. He put a mile between himself and the human in just a few minutes. He was sure he had escaped. An hour later, he saw her again. This time she was ahead of him, sitting on a different rock, still watching through her scope. She waved again. HFY changed direction and ran again. But no matter which way he went, no matter how fast he moved, Sam Davis kept appearing. Sometimes ahead of him, sometimes to the side. Always watching. Always waving. By the third day, HFY was exhausted and confused. He had not slept in over 60 hours. His cybernetic systems were running on emergency power. His organic body was shaking from stress and fatigue. But the humans were still there. Not just Sam Davis now, but others too. Cadet Kate Ross appeared on his left flank. Cadet Ryan Blake showed up behind him. They never tried to capture him. They just followed and watched. HFY realized what was happening. The humans were not trying to catch him quickly. They were wearing him down. They were taking turns following him so they could rest while he could not. They were using his own superior speed against him by making him run until he was too tired to think. This was pack hunting. Just like the persistence predators that Dr. Wright had talked about. The humans were not trying to be faster or stronger than him. They were just waiting for him to collapse from exhaustion. On the third night, HFY finally broke. He was stumbling through the forest, barely able to see straight, when he heard something that made his blood freeze. The humans were singing. It was a quiet song, coming from all around him. Different voices joining in harmony. They were not hiding anymore. They were letting him know that they were everywhere, that they had surrounded him completely. HFY fell to his knees in a small clearing. His cybernetic systems were shutting down to conserve power. His body was shaking. For the first time in his life, he felt completely helpless. The singing stopped. Footsteps approached from all directions. The human cadets walked into the clearing, moving slowly and calmly. They looked fresh and rested while he was falling apart. Exercise complete. Major Cooper's voice came over the radio. Target captured. Cadet. Blake walked up to Kethver and offered him a bottle of water. Good run, big guy. You almost made it. Kethver looked up at the young human. How? How did you do this? Blake smiled. We didn't hunt you like soldiers hunt enemies. We hunted you like humans hunt prey. We just followed until you got tired. As the humans helped him to his feet and gave him food and water, Kethver realized something terrible. These humans had not used advanced technology or superior weapons. They had beaten him using nothing but patience, teamwork, and their natural hunting instincts. They were not civilized beings who had learned to fight. They were predators who had learned to be civilized. And that made them the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy. 3 weeks later, Kethver stood in the main auditorium of the Academy. His time at the human military school was ending, and he had to give a speech about what he had learned. General Patricia Hayes, the Academy's highest commander, sat in the front row along with other important officers. The auditorium was full of human cadets who had trained with him. They looked at him with friendly faces, but Kethver now knew what was behind those smiles. He had seen what these young humans could do when they decided to hunt something. Admiral Chris Taylor had flown in from Fleet Command to hear his report. The Admiral was an older human with gray hair and calm eyes that seemed to see everything. He had fought in the border wars and commanded ships in battles across 3 star systems. Cadet Kethver, General Hayes said, please share your thoughts about your time with us. Kethver walked to the speaking platform. His hands were shaking slightly, which had never happened before. He looked out at all the human faces and tried to find the right words. When I came here, he began, I thought I would teach you about proper warfare. I thought your species was weak and primitive. I was wrong about everything. The humans listened quietly. Some of them smiled, but it was not the mocking kind of smile. They seemed genuinely interested in what he had to say. Your weapons are simple, but you make them work in ways their makers never imagined. Your tactics break every rule of military science, but they win battles that should be impossible. Your soldiers laugh at danger and turn disasters into opportunities. Kethver paused and looked directly at Admiral Taylor. But that is not the most frightening thing about you. The Admiral raised an eyebrow. Oh, what is? The most frightening thing is that you are holding back, Kethver said. Everything I have seen here is just a small sample of what you can do when you decide to be serious. He thought about his conversation with Extel Veen, his fellow Zephyrian who had come to observe the final ceremony. Extel had been studying human history and technology during Kethver's training. Your human internet contains detailed information about every war you have ever fought, Extel had told him. They do not hide their military knowledge. They share it freely. Do you know why? Kethver had not known. Because they are not afraid of other species learning from them, Extel had explained. They are confident that they can always innovate faster than anyone else can copy them. Now standing before the assembled humans, Kethver continued his speech. I studied your history and found that you have fought wars for thousands of years. But the wars you show us in your classes are nothing compared to what you are really capable of. He gestured toward the cadets. These young humans modified training equipment to create new weapons in minutes. They turned broken machines into tactical advantages. They hunted me for 3 days using nothing but persistence and teamwork. And you call this basic training? General Hayes nodded. It is basic training. These cadets still have much to learn. That is exactly my point, Kethver said. If this is basic training, what do your advanced soldiers learn? If these simple weapons can be modified so easily, what can your real military technology do? Admiral Taylor stood up. Perhaps you would like to see some of our real technology. The Admiral led everyone to a secured area of the Academy that Keffer had never been allowed to visit. Inside was a display of weapons and vehicles that looked nothing like the simple equipment used in training. This is what we use when we are not playing games, Admiral Taylor said. Keffer stared at devices that bent space, weapons that could destroy asteroids, and armor that seemed to be made of pure energy. The technology was more advanced than anything in the Zephyrian Empire. Why do you train with primitive equipment if you have this? Keffer asked. Because any fool can win a war with superior technology, the Admiral replied. We train our soldiers to win wars with inferior technology. That way they are prepared for anything. Cadet Blake stepped forward. Sir, permission to speak. Granted, Admiral Taylor said. Keffer, do you want to know the real secret? Blake asked. We do not train to fight other militaries. We train to fight ourselves. Keffer felt confused. What do you mean? Every human military strategy is designed to defeat other humans, Blake explained. We study how we think, how we fight, and how we adapt. Then we create tactics to beat those tactics. Any alien species that fights us is just fighting a weaker version of something we have already learned to defeat. Dr. Wright, who had been watching from the side, joined the conversation. Humans are the only species that practices warfare against their own psychological patterns. You have been training against the most dangerous enemy in the galaxy without realizing it. Keffer felt the familiar chill of fear. You mean that everything you taught me was designed to fight humans? Exactly, Admiral Taylor said. And since we know how to fight ourselves, we know how to fight anyone. The Admiral walked over to a control panel and activated a holographic display. It showed star maps with trade routes, military positions, and fleet movements across the galaxy. Your Zephyrian Empire is powerful, Admiral Taylor said. So are the Nexari Federation and the Cosmic Alliance. But look at this data. The display highlighted human colonies and trading posts. They were everywhere, spread throughout the galaxy in a pattern that looked random, but was actually very strategic. We have been preparing for Galactic War for 50 years, the Admiral continued. Not because we want one, but because we know it will eventually happen. When it does, we will be ready. Keffer studied the display and realized something horrible. The humans had not been building an empire. They had been building a trap. Their colonies and trade routes formed a network that could support military operations anywhere in the galaxy. You have been planning to fight everyone, he whispered. We have been planning to win against everyone, Admiral Taylor corrected. There is a difference. General Hayes stepped forward. Keffer, what will you tell your empire about us? Keffer thought carefully before answering. I will tell them that humans are the most dangerous species in the galaxy. I will tell them that you have technology we cannot match, tactics we cannot predict, and a dedication to warfare that borders on madness. He paused and looked around at all the human faces watching him. And I will tell them that the smartest thing any species can do is make sure humans never have a reason to stop being peaceful. The humans smiled at that, and for the first time since arriving at the Academy, Keffer understood what those smiles really meant. They were not the smiles of friends. They were the smiles of predators who had decided not to hunt Udat as he prepared to leave Earth and return to his empire. Keffer carried with him a new understanding of the universe. The galaxy was not ruled by the strongest or the smartest species. It was ruled by the most dangerous ones, and humans, despite their friendly appearance and peaceful words, were the most dangerous predators the universe had ever created. They were just polite enough to pretend otherwise.